Well, there are so many new faces. I'm Eido Francis Carney, and I am the Abbot here at Olympia Zen Center. I've been in semi-retirement, and so many new people have come, and I don't know all of you, so I'll just tell a brief little bit about myself before I talk about our 100th anniversary. So I began practice in 1970, probably before some of your parents were born. So that's about 53 years now. And I began at Haiku Zendo in Los Altos, California. I moved to Olympia afterwards because my parents were living here and they needed some help. And so I moved to Olympia. And about a year after that, things were going fine. And I accepted a position at Notre Dame Seishin Joshidaigaku, for the Japanese people who are here, which is Notre Dame University for Women in Okayama. And so I went to Japan and I began practice at Entsuji in Kurashiki. Entsuji is Ryokan-san's training temple. And so it's very well-known and also on a pilgrimage route. So I began practicing there. And after I finished my contract with Notre Dame Seishin, I got ordained yet again. I had been ordained by Koben Roshi in 1976, I think. And then I got ordained again in Japan and went to training at Shoboji in Iwate Prefecture, and then came back to America, and then back to Japan, and I received Dharma transmission at Entsuji in the room where Ryokan-san lived at Entsuji. It was a very honorary kind of gigantic thing to happen, I think. And then I came back to the United States and landed again in Olympia. And I began practicing here, and for the very first time, we have some people here who were sat for the very first time, and that was the beginning of the establishment of Olympia Zen Center. But now in Los Angeles, last week, we celebrated the 100-year anniversary of Soto Zen in the United States at Zenshuji Temple. Zenshuji was founded by Japanese who were coming to the United States for new opportunities or for various reasons. And first began in 1915, began to assemble. And in the way that I so deeply appreciate the Asian cultures find one another and they come together and understand their culture together because it is so old. And so they were members of Soto Zen, had practiced Soto Zen in Japan. So they found one another and began to sit together. And it wasn't until 1923 when the land purchase for Zenshuji happened and the temple started to, form itself. And this went along fine. I mean, it was difficult to finance in the beginning, but it worked out. And more and more people began to practice, and teachers began to come from Japan to practice at Zenshuji. And then the war happened, 1941 happened. And as we know, and most such a scar on our American heritage, the Japanese, not only were they sent to the internment camps, but the people who were administrators of Zenshuji were actually arrested. And so they were thought to be spies for Japan. And so the Japanese then went to the internment camps and lived there until the war was over, and then were reunited again with their homes. Some, of course, some lost everything, but generally were reunited. During that time, no taxes had been paid on the land or the temple at Zenchuji. So the concern was whether they would lose everything that they had spent so many years from 1923 up until 1945. But the Japanese came together, raised the money, and paid off the past taxes so that the temple was returned to them because it had been taken over by the county, by the state of California. So Zenchuji was returned and given back to the practitioners. And so many people then came from Japan, and teachers came from Japan, and so many. And if I find my notes here. At the same time, so Zenchuji essentially, after World War II finished, continued in its process of enlarging and including so many people. At the same time, we have happening in the United States then the phenomenon of Zen masters coming to the United States. And so we have Suzuki Roshi, who arrived in 1959, established San Francisco Zen Center and Tassajara. And Maizumi Roshi came in 1956, and he actually practiced at Zenchuji first before he established the Los Angeles Zen Center where he was practicing. Before that, we had D.T. Suzuki, who was a great scholar, and he was teaching Zen aesthetics and Japanese culture and Zen at Columbia University, where Miki received her master's degree in. Did you ever meet D.T. Suzuki?
No.
Okay, well.
But someone else that I knew, because I was in India at the time.
Okay.
But somebody else that I knew did meet him.
Yeah, anyway, he was a great scholar and gave us a gift of an understanding of very deep Japanese culture, which we were able to absorb as much as possible. It's very difficult living in one culture for another culture, for us to understand another culture that comes and lives within one culture. It becomes quite complicated. Yasutani Roshi was another who came to Hawaii, and he established the Sambo Kyodan, and Aitken Roshi then established practice in Hawaii. And then Kobanchino Otagawa, who was my first teacher, arrived in 1967 to help Suzuki Roshi at Tassajara. And when Suzuki Roshi died, he came to Los Altos in 1970 to establish practice there. And we had Hoenjiu Kennet Roshi, the first woman in the United States, the first woman teacher. And she came from practice in Japan. She trained in Japan at Sojiji, thank you. In 1970, she returned to the United States and established so many names and people at Chesta Abbey, where Jikyo did her training. And we had Katagiri Roshi also, who was one of the foundational teachers. In 1963, he first was in Los Angeles and interacting with Zenchuji, and then he came north and worked with Suzuki Roshi at Tassajara, and then went to the Midwest to Minnesota and established practice there. So that was going on after the arrival of Zenchuji and the practice at Zenchuji. The character of Zenchuji is still quite Japanese in its practice. It's in a part of Los Altos that is the International Center in Japantown. And as I mentioned, the Asian communities established themselves very well in community and in connection with one another in ways that Americans have yet to quite comprehend. We tend to be individualistic, and we tend to do our own thing, and we tend not to collaborate in the same way. So at Zenchuji, they have a number of I won't call them clubs exactly, but they are areas of concern and practice for people. And of course, there's a Zenkai, practicing Zazen together. We have a beautiful Zendo about our size, about the size of this Zendo. They have Goeka, that is a practice of singing and sacred music that is also given toward other kinds of music that are now embedded in our ceremonies. And they raise the level of the sense of the sacred within the practice of the ceremony. There are groups that simply study Buddhism together at the temple. There are those who practice what is called Shakyo, which is the writing of maybe the Heart Sutra together, writing of scripture, and the practice of calligraphy together. There's tea ceremony, a very old practice in Japan too, that comes out of the 1600s. And so that is another community within the community. There are taiko players that get together. Matter of fact, one evening we were finishing dinner and we were told we had to leave because the taiko team was coming into practice and they were going to perform at the big dinner that was going to happen the night before. So young people are engaged in taiko practice. Terakoya group practice with children and develop the community of children so that the children get to know one another, and they do all kinds of, maybe they do origami and they do all kinds of practices of Japanese culture together. And then there are youth volunteers who come together to go into the community, out into the community to help in various ways with going to convalescent hospitals, for instance, delivering food if needed, working in a garden when needed somewhere, all kinds of practices that the youth volunteers do. And then the last one that they have is a Zen aerobics group. So they get together and keep fit and sit Zazen together. And I think that's something that I think most people undertake these days, of keeping some kind of physical exercise together, very necessary. And because Zazen is also a practice that keeps the body fit. To hold ourselves in Zazen with the posture of Zazen is exactly to train the body in right posture, and to, when we hold the body it in this form, it is an exercise in itself. But of course, we need more aerobics, so we bow. Perhaps that is our aerobic work. I don't know. But what is important, and I do have a catalog here to show you a book of Zenji's 100th anniversary, and it shows many, many photographs. I will bring it upstairs later. So at the ceremony that we did, we were also paying homage to a preliminary ceremony for a preliminary memorial ceremony for the 700th anniversary of Dai Honzon Sojiji founder, Taiso Keizan Joken Zenji. And we were doing the preliminary ceremonies that were happening all around the United States prior to the great 700th ceremony that will happen at Sojiji and of course at AAG. So for us in America, so we are coming up upon maybe our 25-year anniversary here at Olympia Zen Center in 2025. But we can't comprehend 700 years. I mean, even the United States, we can't comprehend the 700 years of a practice that creates community and that is the practice of opening us to awakening. So the gift of that transmission to America for the 100 years that we have of Dogen Zenji's Soto Zen is baby time. It's baby in comparison to the continuing practice in Japan from the year 1252 Dogen died in 1252 and established Eiheiji earlier. So we can't quite imagine the transmission and understand the length and depth of the transmission of Dharma here in America. We are still learning the meaning of that transmission and what it means to be able to carry the Buddha Dharma within us, to be able to hold it in a culture that is very difficult culture, America. Extremely difficult, not sensitive to flowers, to the idea of a flower in the front of the train where the driver drives the train and has a flower on the dashboard of the Shinkansen. And that kind of care and sensitivity we are still learning in the United States. It is so difficult for us to listen, to stop and stay still and allow the sounds and the birds to inform us of something larger than we are. So the transmission is so deep that maybe in 500 more years, we will begin to understand. I really do mean it that way. We talk about coming to practice and just observing practice for several years. And then for maybe 5 or 8 more years, we really learn the forms and we begin to practice. And maybe in about 25 years, we learn the meaning of what it is we are doing. So to hold that kind of transmission and sensitivity is an extremely great task in the culture we are living in. Some Americans, we think of ourselves as barbarians in relationship to some other cultures sometimes. We walk over things that we don't understand we are doing. So we have this incredible opportunity to stop, to sit, to allow Zazen to arise in us, to allow the transmission to touch the body, this body that we are, that holds the muscle of awakening. And I hope greatly that we can carry that transmission. I hope that we can take it with us where we go in our lives, where we live and where we work, that we don't have to proselytize. All we have to do is be ourselves and be awake and be aware and present wherever we are. And that is huge. That is everything. It was a great honor to be there with Genjo at the 100th anniversary. Genjo participated in one of the ceremonies. He was a very beautiful monk in his carriage in the ceremony. It was very wonderful to watch him. It was also an honor for the head priest of all of Soto Zen to come to the United States and to perform that very deep, powerful ceremony, which we were able to be with, to observe, to bow into. and to take with us. It was a great honor. It was a great honor to be with the 50 monks who came from the United States, 50 monks who came from Japan. And the sense of that community was very wonderful. Our American training is the same training that we receive in Japan. And so there was that blending of Americans and Japanese together without any sense of separation of our training, of our best understanding of this transmission, our carrying it forward for the next 100 years. That was the big hope of the founder, of the head of Soto Zen, that we look to the next 100 years to carry forward the great teachings of Dogen Zenji and Keizan Zenji. So I thank you very much for your practice, for your courage to take up this difficult and deep practice that is soul restorative, that restores all kinds of aspects of your life, and that you carry it as long as you can in your life. So may we do well. May we do the best we can as we go forward for the next 100 years, beginning now.
If there's time, we do some questions. If you're interested.
Okay, yeah. If anybody has any questions. Yes.
Thank you.
Speak loudly for the microphone here.
Will do. Two great models that we follow here are Dogen Zenji and Ryokan-san. Do you have some thoughts you could share talking about those two, how they compare, how they embody the Dharma in their lives?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So Dogen Zenji, we know he is the author, the writer of Shobogenzo, one of the most profound documents, spiritual documents we have in world history. It's thought to be at the top of world documents, right up with other Western documents of Augustine and Thomas Aquinas. It is a profound work. At the gathering, we didn't receive the Shobogenzo yet, but there was the unveiling of the Shobogenzo, the new translation of Shobogenzo, which I hope that we will buy a copy of, but it's translated by 5 of the great scholars. We have Buddhist scholars in the United States, translated into English. This document given to us by Dogen Zenji has a kind of a strictness about it, a very straightforward practice. His writings about virtue are so profound and so impossible to imagine that anyone but Dogen Zenji could embody the great virtues of his practice. And of course, we have the transmission from Dogen Zenji all the way forward, the thousands and thousands of monks who held the transmission, taught Shobogenzo, and gave it to us now in the United States. And on the other hand, my home temple is Entsuji, Ryokan-san's training temple, which was very strict in its time. And then Ryokan-san left Entsuji. He was named the next abbot, but it was not for him. He was not an administrator. He was not a politician. He was not somebody who could work at that kind of leading a sangha. And especially after a teacher dies, there is so much conflict and all kinds of turmoil. And so he left and he went on his own, ultimately returning to Niigata Prefecture, where he lived and lived in Gogowan. So there is maybe Ryokan-san we could think of as a Taoist practitioner, artistic, loving, easygoing, caring for children, out playing Go with the people in the village. And then Dogen Zenji administrating and the strictness of the monastic, held together in one culture that allows us to hold both at the same time. If we didn't have Ryokan-san, I think it would be a little bit crazy making with too much strictness. And Ryokan is often thought to be the second greatest teacher in Japan because of that relationship of art and ease with the strictness and the monastic. And in a way, that's our own lives. We come here and we hold the strictness of these forms because it teaches us about the virtue of our lives. And then we go home and we put our feet up and we cook and we have a glass of wine for dinner and whatever it is we do. So we hold those both pieces together. Even monks hold both pieces together, even though we might live in the strictness of the monastic life. We absolutely relax. We do have relaxed time. And we have to. If you didn't, you would be a crazy person. You would just be too strict. And Zazen itself, although we hold our body in this form and this shape, Zazen is something, I can't call it loose, but it is something at the deepest relaxation of the psyche. It's at the deepest home where we live. And that's what we take with us. And from the point of relaxation, we never forget that we have the monastic side. And what we do is the same as we do in the monastic life. All these forms that we practice are monastic. They're not different from what monks do in training. So we are the only temple in the United States that practices with Ryokan-san, that has him as our great teacher, with Dogen Zenji and the Buddha, of course. So we are very lucky that somehow I wandered into that temple and Roshi transmitted and gave us this here. And we do our best to live up to it. Thank you, Fletcher. What a wonderful question. I forgot all about the Shobogenzo. There was this much about this, and I don't want to keep you, and we can talk later. So I think that one question is fine, because the coffee is being brewed, and that is the other side of this. We sit in strict, and then we go and we relax and have a cup of coffee and whatever else we have to eat and be together. So thank you very much for your practice.
4 bodhisattva vows. You can go up and do 3 prostrations.
I do the
Sorry, you wait till the end and then they happen.
Okay, I think close to the end I go and do that with the end. Okay.
Yeah.